3 days ago, I asked ChatGPT to help me understand fusion energy. It gave me a beautifully written answer in 4 seconds. What I didn't see is that somewhere in Iowa, a windowless building the size of 6 football fields just drank enough electricity to power 1,800 homes. Every AI image, every conversation, every self-driving car processing its surroundings, every AI video you scroll past, all of it requires massive amounts of electricity. And right now, experts and regulators are sounding the alarm. They're saying AI is an energy-devouring monster that will crash our grids. I spent the last 6 weeks investigating this crisis. I spoke with grid operators, energy investors, nuclear engineers, and climate scientists. The experts warning us about AI's energy consumption. They're looking at the right data, but they've got the conclusion exactly backwards. Let's start with why everyone's terrified. Right now, the world's data centers consume roughly 460 terawatt-hours of electricity per year. That's more than the entire nation of France. Every home, every business, every streetlight. Data centers use more. By 2030, global data center electricity consumption is projected to more than double, over 1,000 terawatt-hours annually. That's the consumption of Japan. A single Google search uses 0.3 watt-hours. A single ChatGPT, it uses roughly 10 times more. But training models is the real cost. Training GPT-4 consumed an estimated 50 gig. That's enough to power every home in a city of 180,000 people for an entire year. And the race is on. OpenAI, Google, Meta, Anthropic, Xiaol, training bigger models, all consuming exponentially more power. In Northern Virginia, power demand is growing so fast that the local utility warned it cannot build new transmission lines fast enough. Ireland's data centers now consume 21% of the nation's electricity. Singapore and the Netherlands are turning new projects away. The crisis is global. AI is a power-hungry monster, and if nothing changes, it will overwhelm our grids and spike prices. But here's what the headlines are missing. The people in the boardrooms at Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, and OpenAI. They see these exact same numbers. They see the same crisis. But to them, this isn't a climate problem. This isn't a policy problem. This is a survival problem. These companies have a combined market capitalization of over $9 trillion. Their entire future, their AI products, their revenue growth, their stock prices, their competitive survival depends on one thing: getting enough power. Without electricity, AI doesn't work. Not works poorly. Doesn't work at all. And so these 5 companies, with more capital, more engineering talent, and more urgency than any government on Earth, are now doing something unprecedented. They're building their own energy future. From scratch, at a scale and speed the world has never seen. Now, I need to be honest with you about something. When I started researching this story, I expected to find a climate disaster in the making. What I found instead is the fastest energy transformation in human history. And it's being driven by the last industry anyone expected. Let me show you. September 20th, 2024. Microsoft announced a deal that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. They signed a 20-year power purchase agreement with Constellation Energy to restart Unit 1 of the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant. Let me say that again. Microsoft is restarting 3 Mile Island. This is the same facility whose Unit 2 suffered the most infamous nuclear accident in American history in 1979. The accident that essentially ended new nuclear construction in the United States for 4 decades, the facility whose name became synonymous with nuclear fear. But here's what most people don't know. Unit 1, the reactor Microsoft is restarting, operated safely for 45 years. It was only shut down in 2019 for economic reasons. It couldn't compete with cheap natural gas. Under a new name, the Crane Clean Energy Center, Unit 1 will be brought back online by 2028. It will deliver 835 megawatts of carbon-free, 24/7 baseload power directly to Microsoft's data center operations. For context, that's enough electricity to to power roughly 700,000 American homes. This is the single largest corporate nuclear energy deal in history. But Microsoft is not alone. And this is where it gets extraordinary. In October 2024, Google signed a first-of-its-kind agreement with Kairos Power to deploy small modular reactors, SMRs, for its data center operations. The plan calls for the first SMR to come online by 2030, with a total of 500 megawatts of nuclear capacity by 2035. Now, if you're not familiar with pay attention, because this technology is about to reshape the energy landscape. Traditional nuclear plants are enormous. They take 10 to 15 years to build. They cost $10 to $30 billion. They require massive cooling infrastructure, dedicated transmission lines, and complex custom engineering. Every plant is essentially a unique mega project. SMRs are different. They're small, roughly 1/10 to 1/3 the output of a traditional reactor. They're modular, meaning they're factory manufactured in standardized units and shipped to site. Like building cars, instead of handcrafting locomotives. Many designs use passive safety systems, meaning they shut themselves down safely without human intervention or external power. They rely on basic physics, gravity, natural convection, thermodynamics, not computers, not backup generators. Physics. And they can be deployed where the power is needed, right next to a data center, a factory, or a remote community. Amazon went even further. They invested over $500 million in X-Energy, one of the leading SMR developers, and they purchased an entire nuclear-powered data center campus from Tolan Energy, situated right next to the Susquehanna plant. Then, in early 2025, Meta issued a request for proposals seeking 1 to 4 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity for its AI operations. To put that in perspective, 4 gigawatts is roughly for full-sized traditional nuclear reactors. This could be the single largest corporate energy procurement in history. And here's what makes this moment truly historic. For 50 years, nuclear power has been trapped in a political and economic limbo. Governments debated it endlessly. Environmental groups opposed it. Regulators made construction so slow and expensive that most projects became economically unviable. The Western world essentially stopped building new nuclear capacity. Governments couldn't solve this. Decades of policy papers, congressional hearings, and international summits produced almost nothing. And then big tech showed up with an existential need for 24/7s, carbon-free, always-on power, and a blank checkbook. They didn't lobby for decades. They didn't wait for policy consensus. They just bought it. Because they had to. And they're not stopping at Fission. Sam Altman, the CEO of the company that started this entire AI explosion, has personally invested $375 million into Hillion Energy, a fusion startup. Hillion has signed a power purchase agreement with Microsoft to deliver fusion-generated electricity by 2028. Let me say that again. There is now a signed commercial contract for fusion power, something that has never existed in history. Now, I need to be honest with you. Fusion timelines have been notoriously optimistic. There's a famous joke. Fusion is always 30 years away. Hillion's 2028 target is extraordinarily ambitious. Many experts are skeptical. I spoke with Dr. Emily Chun, a plasma physicist at MIT. She's been working on fusion for 20 years. She told me, 2028 for commercial fusion power. I'd love to see it, but the engineering challenges are immense. Hillion is doing innovative work, but expecting grid delivery in 4 years is optimistic. So temper your expectations on time. But here's what is undeniable. The scale of private investment in fusion has exploded. Commonwealth Fusion Systems, backed by Bill Gates and Google, raised $1.8 billion, the largest private fusion raise in history. TA Technologies raised $1.2 billion from Google and Chevron. Total private fusion investment now exceeds $6 billion. That money is not being invested by dreamers. It's being invested by the most sophisticated, data-driven, profit-motivated companies on Earth. People who don't throw billions at fantasies. And the primary reason they're doing it. AI needs the power. And if fusion can deliver it, even 10 years from now, instead of 5, That's a game. But the nuclear renaissance is only one piece of this puzzle, because big tech's hunger for power is also unlocking another energy source that sits directly beneath our feet and has been ignored for decades: geothermal energy. For most of history, geothermal power required very specific geological conditions: volcanic activity, hot springs, natural reservoirs of superheated water close to the surface. That's why almost all of the world's geothermal capacity is concentrated in places like Iceland and parts of the western United States. If you didn't have a volcano nearby, you didn't have geothermal. But in 2023, a company called Fervo Energy, backed by Google, proved something that changes everything. Using advanced horizontal drilling and hydraulic stimulation techniques borrowed from the oil and gas industry, Fervo successfully created what's called an enhanced geothermal system, or EGS. This technology doesn't require natural hot water reservoirs. Instead, it drills deep into hot, dry rock, creates artificial fracture networks, injects water, and extracts the resulting steam. The implication is staggering. Enhanced geothermal can work essentially anywhere on Earth. You don't need a volcano. You don't need hot springs. You just need to drill deep enough. And everywhere on this planet, the deeper you go, the hotter it gets. Google signed a first-of-its-kind power purchase agreement with Fervo to bring 115 megawatts online for its data centers. Fervo's next Project Cape in Utah, targeting 2026, will be 400 megawatts. That's the output of a mid-size natural gas plant from heat in the ground. The U.S. Department of Energy estimates that the U.S. alone has over 5,000 gigawatts of recoverable geothermal potential. The geothermal energy beneath American soil is more than 4 times the country's total current power capacity. But it gets even more ambitious. A company called Quaise Energy, a spin-off from MIT, is developing millimeter wave drilling technology. They're using gyrotrons to vaporize rock with focused microwave energy. Their goal: drill 12 miles deep into superhot rock at 500 degrees Celsius. At those depths, a single well could produce 10 times the energy, and it could be drilled anywhere, beneath a data center in Virginia, a factory in Germany, a city in India. I spoke with Sarah Martinez, a geothermal engineer who's been in the industry for 15 years. She told me, what Fervo is doing with enhanced geothermal is proven and scaling now. Quaise's drilling, that's bleeding edge. If it works, it's revolutionary. But there are serious engineering challenges ahead. Without AI's desperate need for 24/7 baseload power, this technology might have remained a research curiosity. AI's demand is pulling geothermal to market 5 to 10 years ahead of schedule, the same way the space race accelerated satellite technology. AI's energy hunger is accelerating geothermal. Big tech is executing the largest corporate renewable energy procurement in history. They're bending the cost curve for everyone. Amazon is now the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. Over 20 gigawatts contracted globally. That's more renewable capacity than most countries have built. Microsoft is committed to 10.5 gig. Google, Meta, and Apple each have multi-gigawatt portfolios. Together, these 5 companies have contracted more clean energy capacity than nations like Sweden or Argentina. And this matters beyond just powering data centers, because of something called Wright's Law. Wright's Law observes that for every cumulative doubling of units produced, the cost of a technology drops by a consistent percentage. For solar panels, that historical rate has been roughly 24% cost reduction for every doubling of cumulative global capacity. What big tech is doing by purchasing tens of gigawatts is accelerating cumulative production. They're pushing the world further down the learning curve. Faster. In 1977, a single watt of solar capacity cost $76. Today, it costs 10 cents. That is a 99.87% cost decline. And the curve is still falling. Battery storage is following the same trajectory. Lithium-ion battery pack prices have fallen from $1,200 per kilowatt-hour in 2010 to $115 in 2024. A 90% decline. Bloomberg and EF projects they'll cross the critical $100 per kilowatt-hour threshold within the next 1 to 2 years. the point at which battery storage achieves full economic parity with fossil fuel peaker plants, and electric vehicles become cheaper than combustion cars at every price point. Every gigawatt that big tech contracts accelerates this decline. Their demand pulls forward factory construction, manufacturing scale, and supply chain optimization, all of which drive costs down for everyone, including you. And here's the layer of this revolution that might be the most elegant. AI isn't just consuming energy, it's also being used to dramatically optimize how energy is generated, distributed, and consumed. In 2016, Google's DeepMind applied machine learning to the cooling systems in their data centers, reducing cooling energy consumption by 40%. DeepMind then applied similar AI to wind farm output prediction, allowing grid operators to schedule wind energy like a dispatchable power source. That increased the economic value of wind energy by roughly 20%. That changes the entire economics of wind power. Tesla's Autobiter platform uses AI to coordinate thousands of home batteries into virtual power plants to stabilize the grid during peak demand. Utilidata, partnered with NVIDIA, is deploying AI-powered chips directly into smart grid hardware like transformers to optimize electricity flow in real time, reducing the 5 to 8% of all generated electricity currently lost in transmission. That's more than India's entire annual electricity consumption. AI is simultaneously the cause of the energy demand surge, and the tool that makes the energy system smarter and more efficient. It's the arsonist and the firefighter, and the net effect, as the data increasingly shows, is overwhelmingly positive. Now here's where I need you to zoom out with me. These aren't just energy stories. They're the first chapter of something much bigger. Right now, roughly 2 billion people live in water-stressed regions. Desalination, turning seawater into fresh water, is a proven technology. We know how to do it. Israel already gets over 80% of its drinking water from desalination. The problem, it's energy intensive. A large desalination plant requires enormous amounts of continuous power. At current energy prices, large-scale desalination remains too expensive for most developing nations. But if energy becomes 2, 3, 5 times cheaper, desalination becomes trivially affordable. Water scarcity, one of the most urgent humanitarian crises of the 21st century, becomes a solvable engineering problem rather than an existential threat. Vertical farming, growing crops in controlled indoor environments, can produce 100 times more food per square meter than traditional agriculture, while using 95% less water and 0 pesticides. The only input it requires, in abundance: electricity for LED lighting, climate control, and water circulation. At today's energy prices, vertical farming works for high-value crops like lettuce and herbs. But if energy costs drop dramatically, you could grow staple crops, rice, wheat, corn, in vertical farms. In the middle of a desert or a frozen tundra, food security decoupled from climate, geography, and season. Here's one that might surprise you. The technology to pull carbon dioxide directly out of the atmosphere already exists. It's called direct air capture. Companies like Climeworks in Iceland and Carbon Engineering in Texas have built working facilities. The problem? It's incredibly energy intensive. Capturing 1 ton of CO currently requires roughly 2,000 kilowatt-hours of energy and costs between $400 and $1,000 per ton. At those prices, it's far too expensive to operate at the scale needed to meaningfully impact atmospheric COA levels. But what happens when energy becomes 5 to 10 times cheaper? Suddenly, direct air capture drops to $50 to $100 per ton. At that price point, you could economically remove billions of tons of CO from the atmosphere every year. We could not only stop adding carbon, we could start reversing the damage already done. Abundant clean energy doesn't just prevent future emissions. It gives us the tools to clean up the mess we've already made. Electric vehicles have already reached cost parity with gasoline cars in several markets. As battery prices fall below $100 per kilowatt-hour and cheap renewable electricity floods the grid, the cost of driving per mile drops toward near zero. Your daily commute, your road trips, freight, logistics, powered by electricity that costs a fraction of what gasoline costs today. And it's not just cars. Electric trucks, electric short-haul aviation, electric ferries, all become economically viable when electricity is cheap and abundant. This one is profound and under-discussed. For over a century, global geopolitics has been fundamentally shaped by fossil fuels. Wars have been fought over oil. Dictatorships have been sustained by petroleum revenues. Entire economies are built on fossil fuel exports. Energy dependence has given petrostates leverage over democracies. But here's the thing about sunlight. Wind, uranium, lithium, and the heat beneath the Earth's surface, they're not concentrated in a few countries controlled by a few regimes. They're everywhere. When every nation can generate its own clean energy domestically, the geopolitical leverage of fossil fuel exporters evaporates. Energy independence becomes the default, not the exception. The strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz diminishes, the petrodollar system weakens. The power dynamics of the 20th century dissolve. Now, I need to be honest about this. This transition will not be painless. The economic collapse of petrostate economies could cause massive instability, regional conflicts. Millions of people whose livelihoods depend on fossil fuel industries will need new jobs, new skills, and support during the transition. And concentrating energy decision-making in the hands of 5 unelected corporations raises serious governance questions. The mining and processing of lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements has real environmental and social costs. Child labor in cobalt mines, water contamination from lithium extraction, indigenous land rights conflicts. These must be managed responsibly. And right now, the industry is not moving fast enough on this. But even acknowledging these challenges, the trajectory is clear. The International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that the global energy transition will require over $150 trillion in cumulative investment through 2050. That's not a cost. That's the largest economic stimulus in human history. Every dollar spent on solar panels, batteries, nuclear reactors, grid upgrades, EV charging infrastructure, geothermal wells, and hydrogen systems creates jobs, builds industries, generates economic activity. The energy transition isn't about sacrifice. It's about building the largest new industrial ecosystem the world has ever seen. And AI just pressed fast forward. So, the question you're asking, when? Let me walk you through a defensible timeline, 2025 to 2027. Ground is broken on the first wave of AI-driven SMRs. Fervo Energy's enhanced geothermal. Project Cape begins producing 400 megawatts in Utah. Solar module costs fall another 30 to 40%. Battery storage crosses the $100 per kilowatt-hour threshold. 3 Mile Island Unit. 1 restart preparations enter the final phase. Global clean energy investment exceeds $2.5 trillion annually. You start hearing about energy abundance as a mainstream concept. 2027 to 2030. The first Google Kairos SMR comes online. 3 Mile Island restarts. Helion attempts its first fusion demonstration. Success is uncertain, but the attempt itself is historic. Enhanced geothermal capacity reaches multi-gigawatt scale. Battery storage becomes cheaper than running existing gas peaker plants, triggering a wave of gas plant retirements. Solar plus storage becomes the cheapest new electricity source in virtually every country. Multiple nations begin experiencing periods where renewable electricity supply exceeds total demand. In regions with high renewable penetration, South Australia, California, Texas, parts of Spain and Germany, wholesale electricity prices are already dropping to zero or below zero during peak hours. Negative electricity prices, producers literally paying consumers to take power off the grid. That's not a hypothetical future. It's happening now. 2030 to 2035. This is where second-order effects become visible. Widespread cheap electricity begins transforming water infrastructure, food production, and transportation economics. Direct air capture starts scaling. The First Nations achieve near-complete decarbonization of their electricity grids. The concept of energy scarcity begins to feel as outdated as information scarcity after the internet. Now, I need to be honest about the challenges, because this isn't a fairy tale supply chains. The world needs dramatically more lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, rare earth elements. and enriched uranium. I spoke with Maria Santos, an environmental engineer who's worked on mining projects in South America. She told me, lithium extraction is straining water resources. We need better extraction technologies, or we risk trading one crisis for another. Supply bottlenecks are real and could slow deployment. Grid infrastructure, building new lines, and modernizing systems is slow and often blocked by permitting challenges and local opposition. In many countries, the grid is the bottleneck. Policy and regulation remain slow. Utility business models resist disruption. Workforce. The world needs millions of skilled workers, electricians, nuclear engineers, geothermal drillers, and software engineers. Intermittency and storage duration. While batteries handle short duration well, multi-day storage remains an unsolved challenge. These challenges are real. But here's the critical distinction. They are engineering and logistics problems, not physics problems. We're not waiting for a miracle. The technologies exist. The economics work. The capital is flowing. What remains is execution, and execution is exactly what these companies do better than anyone in the world. Throughout history, the pattern repeats. Massive demand for a resource drives innovation that ultimately makes that resource more abundant and cheaper than anyone imagined. The demand for faster communication gave us the internet, and information became nearly free. The demand for faster computation gave us Moore's law, and computing power became nearly free. And now, the demand for AI is doing the same thing to energy. This is not a prediction. This is not wishful thinking. This is capital being deployed, contracts being signed, ground being broken, and technology being proven. Right now, as you watch this video, we are living through the most important energy transition in human history, and it's being accelerated by the last technology anyone expected. I started this investigation expecting to find a disaster. What I found instead was the fastest energy transformation in human history, driven by technology. Capital and necessity moving at a speed governments could never match. 3 months ago, I visited Fervo Energy's geothermal test site in Nevada, standing next to a well pulling heat from 2 miles underground. Heat that will power data centers, homes, and eventually entire cities. I felt something I hadn't felt in years of covering energy and climate. Hope. Not naive hope, not wishful thinking, but the kind of hope that comes from watching people actually build the future. Not debate it, not study it. Build Italiano. And the implications go so far beyond just keeping the lights on. Abundant, cheap, clean energy is the master key that unlocks solutions to water scarcity, food security, climate reversal, and energy independence. It reshapes geopolitics. It rebuilds economies. It gives us the tools to fix what we've broken. This channel exists to track every breakthrough, every setback, every milestone, and every twist in this revolution, with the depth, honesty, and rigor this story deserves. If this video changed how you think about energy and AI, subscribe. Hit the notification bell, because in 5 years, you'll want to say you saw it coming. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Do you think AI will ultimately help or hurt the energy transition? What excites you most? What worries you? I read every comment, and the best discussions happen down there. Next week, I'm going deep into the dark side of the energy transition, the global battle for lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, and who's really paying the price for our clean energy future. You won't want to miss it. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep building the future you want to live in. I'll see you in the next one.